So I got a chance to go to New York City to screen the movie A Complete Unknown, which is a film based on Bob Dylan.
I actually got that.
And afterwards, I got to talk to the cinematographer, Phedon Papamichael.
Hello. Hello.
He said hi to us.
Try not to freak out. We're not freaking, we're cool.
But huge thanks to Sony Cine for sponsoring this episode, sending me out to New York City and getting us access to the big leagues.
Hey, I recognize that movie. The DP that shot this, we're gonna go talk to him.
An absolute legend. I mean, what has he shot? Too many to list off, honestly. I mean, Trial of Chicago 7, Ford versus Ferrari, one of my favorites of recent years, Nebraska, This Is 40, Pursuit of Happiness, and this list just keeps going. It's insane, like Patch Adams with Robin Williams and Cool Runnings, which Carrie was very excited for. I got to ask him about some really unique things he did on this latest film, like shooting a lot of it at ISO 12,800, which is pretty crazy, and he shot it on the Sony Venice, which of course is a digital camera, but watching the film, it really looks and feels like you're watching something that was shot on film. So he did this process where it actually used real film. So let's go ahead and dive into the conversation with Phedon Papamichael, who Sony Cine Tanya calls a
Stud Muffin. So that's what we're gonna make sure we put your name there, and then underneath Stud Muffin. Well, congratulations on the new film.
Thanks.
I see that your work is continuing to evolve.
I apply like a different approach to every movie. I mean, I've done such a variety of genre. I mean, you know, like Cool Runnings, $1 Million Hotel, Ides of March, Descendants, Sideways, Nebraska. I mean, so I don't want people to see a movie and go, oh, well, Phedon shot that. But I always like to really find like a new language for each project. And we want it to be a little less polished, a little more emotional, a bit rougher with this, and I think we did, and a bit darker, a little less high key, especially coming from Indiana Jones, which is such a, you know, kind of preset formula that we had to respect.
I heard a lot of it was shot at, what, 12,800 ISO?
Yeah.
Is that true? That's
Yeah. So you got the 800 base and the 3200 base. So on day work, I would go 800 base, but probably 1600 because it also protects my highlights a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
How about
then-
interiors?
No, interiors, I would be 64. Although in my extensive testing and pre-production, I really didn't find it problematic going to 12,800.
And just to clarify, we're not talking about 1,280 ISO, which would actually be fairly normal. We're talking about 12,800 ISO. And that's a feature that I have on the FX3, where basically if it becomes pitch dark, then I just flip it in that mode and all of a sudden I could see again because the sensor becomes super sensitive to light. And sure, technically there's a lot of cameras that you could push to 12,800, right? But the image starts to fall apart. But I feel like Sony has held that title of King of Low Light for a little while now, and it's interesting to see that on the very high end, the Sony Venice 2, that 12,800 is actually good enough to use on the big screen.
This is your first film that you shot at high sensitivities like this.
Yeah, I've never really gone above 1260 with the other digital cameras. And then when we were in film, I guess it was 800 stock was like the fastest.
So was it strange? at
Yeah,
all having
I
that?
mean, it's an adjustment. The only strange thing was looking at something that looks perfectly good and lit on the monitor and then actually walking onto set and it being like pitch black.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
where even the actors, they're used to regular movies.
Right.
They go, are we ready? Are we lit? I'm like, yeah. And it'd be like nothing here. You know, it'd be like one tube somewhere. It's also nice for them because, you know, they're not like in a forest of equipment and stands and not a hot set, you know.
So you've seen the whole evolution. I mean,
Yeah.
back from when you started, it's a completely different game.
Yeah, I mean, we used to melt down sets with our Dinos, you know, like, I mean, I was always big into tungsten 9 lights and Dinos, and we'd crack windows and paint would start bubbling and, you know, the sets would be hot. And
Oh yeah. Seems like you're able to do a lot more with like less lights, and
Yeah.
also it sounds like you don't have to light for exposure nearly as much, but more lighting for contrast.
Yeah.
You say that's
yeah.
where you're.
I mean, I'm still controlling my contrast. When you're dealing with these cameras, especially the Venice 2 at like 6,400, 12,800, they say it's you know, it picks up everything. So it's a lot of it is my lighting has become about taking light away rather than adding light. So I create a lot of negatives, blacks, still have the same contrast ratios, and it's not like, oh, I'm using all natural light. It's just like, it really just allows me to stop down and shoot at deeper stops. You know, I always try to be around at least an 8. sometimes like 11.
So that's interesting, right? It's not like he used the 12,800 to have like a night vision camera, but more so that he could use deeper stops. So right now I'm at a f2.8, but you know, you got kind of a blurry background, especially as I get into like a close-up. But if he shot at like what, T8 or T11 he used, then of course you get more in focus in the background. But of course that also means you need either a lot more light or a much more sensitive sensor. It's basically gonna jump into the higher base sensitivity there. So there we go. We're at an f8 now, and I didn't have to add more lights. I just have a lot more in focus. So this is basically the settings that Phedon Papamichael used to shoot the movie. I'm basically Phedon Papamichael right now. Give me an Oscar.
I'd like the audience to roam the frame and check out something in the background, like a guitar hanging on the wall or something, or album cover. And I always like to feel the environment, and I like wider lensing, and it still has fall off. I mean, even at 8:11. This project in particular, because I'm trying to evoke more of the feel of a movie shot in the 60s and textures in New York and the period and the clubs. I really was looking for a deeper stop and pitched that to Mangold and said, so you know, we're using a new camera, and I think I can shoot everything at 8:11, even on night exteriors. And go, oh, I love that idea. Sometimes we'd be shooting, and you know, he's pretty technical. He's a still photographer himself. He's like, what stop you're on? I'm like 5.5. Like, why? Go switch to 12,800. Why are we 64? Give me that extra stop. You said it's fine. So we did it, and you know, we never had really problems with it.
I'm so impressed by timepieces because it's every little detail that's in frame has to be
all the props.
perfect.
I mean, it's really nice when everyone comes together, you know.
Yeah.
Every little magazine, every postcard, every menu. It turns out like my last 3 movies are all 60s. New York, Indiana Jones has it. Trial of Chicago 7.
You're familiar with the process then
Yeah,
of shooting period pieces.
I've been dialed into the, Ford versus Ferrari is 60s. So yeah, I'm a 60s New York expert. And of course all the picture cars, you know, which were also limited to how many we have, and you don't want all the same 8 cars in every shot of a movie. So, you know, it's about being creative and shuttling them around and getting some delivery vans and trucks. It's challenging, especially in New York, to do period. We would be able to lock up the exit of the Holland Tunnel, and we would get it for like 5 minutes at a time. Then every take, we'd have to release all the traffic and then send our picture cars, which are period cars, loop back around and come out of the tunnel again.
So you can't just do retake after retake.
No. And this is his apartment, based on photos of him in this space, and the sheets and the pillows and the coffee in that fridge and the record player and what's on the mantle and what's hanging above the mantle, and that's fun, you know. And also for the actor, because, you know, Timmy coming in and discovering like he's studied and prepared for this character for so long, but then actually to walk into his apartment. I see him check out the place. Like here, we didn't know where he's going to sit. Is he going to be over by the armchair or at his desk? And then eventually he's settled into that corner on his bed. I just have that one daylight source coming in through the window and another one in the back room, and that's it. And the rest is all just passive bounce off the pillow and off the sheets. There's no fill or anything inside the room.
Oh, really? So this is just the 2 hard lights coming in through the windows?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little tube that's stuck there.
Right,
but that's it. Yeah, there's very minimal lighting.
Not gonna lie, I was actually really amazed at how simple the lighting setup was there, but it looks so good. I mean, just the 2 hard lights, and that's one of the things that I found inspiring about his method is he focuses on making the space work more than just like focusing on each individual shot and being like, okay, the light goes here for this close-up. But another thing I caught during that was that it wasn't him that necessarily did the blocking and the layout of the room of where the actors are or the director. It was actually the actor Timothée Chalamet, which is unique.
I've heard that you like to work around actors and let them kind of do their thing, and that in a way dictates a lot of your shots.
So we do approach it where we bring the actors to the set, especially if you have actors like Timothy, and who's also very instinctive and has a process of discovering and feeling the space or location, whether it's a little club he's playing in or his apartment. And so we want to stay fluid and flexible to seeing what they're going to give us, how they're going to move, where they choose to sit. It's not like, okay, you come in here, you're going to sit here, this is your mark for when you stand up, and we're going to start with this shot. Like, we don't do that. Timothy, especially, you want to give him his time because he'll offer you so many interesting things and choices that you wouldn't really expect. And then we'll see, okay, you choose to sit over there in the corner. I go, that's not ideal for light, but it's kind of interesting choice.
Honestly, I find that really inspiring because it's not about, getting the perfect lighting for each shot, but doing what's best for the film as a whole and conveying the story properly and the emotions. There's also this like nostalgia that comes through the frame as you're watching the movie. And I think that's why he went through the process of shooting digital, but then still passing it through film. How does that work?
In the pursuit of a film look, one of the places I was exploring was Photocam, and now of course they have a lab. So then David Cole, the colorist, he goes, we can do what we call the shift AI, analog intermediate.
So the Shift AI honestly could be a video on its own because there's a lot to it and it's really fascinating. But the AI doesn't mean like, the futuristic AI robots taking over. No, it's actually the opposite. It's analog intermediate. But in a nutshell, you start off by shooting digital, right? And then you go through your DI, you cut it, you grade it, do all that stuff. And then you basically transfer it onto actual film stock, like the actual negative that's Kodak 2383 or something like that. 2383. I actually got that right. I had to look at my notes though. I'm not that savvy when it comes to film, honestly, but it's actually on film, negative now.
And then you scan it back in. You're picking up all the qualities of it's like having shot on film.
Can you describe what you were going for by doing that round trip, or is it something that's hard to put into words in terms of like the look or texture?
It's almost impossible to go, well, it does that because it reacts different to different situations, like in terms of how it affects or shifts some colors. And you can A/B it.
It's an emotional thing.
It is kind of, yeah. Sometimes you sit there in the screen and you feel like, wow, this is really, like, I really feel like I'm watching a film projection,
Yeah.
And it's also something that you can't really question, like nobody can go, oh, you guys like tried too hard and make it look like you put your grain is too. It's like, no, it is not. We didn't put grain. It's the actual films. Of course, I shoot digital now, but I've shot 55 features and probably 40 of them have been on film.
It's so interesting using the newest technology of having such high base sensors and then merging that with just the traditional film that's
and
familiar.
Of course I have people come up to me and it's like, well, if that's your main objective, like, why don't you just shoot film? I go, well, because in order to shoot an 8 with these anamorphics, I would have to have a lot of lights and a lot of firepower, so that's why.
This seems like a good example of a scene that would not have really been possible with film.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then that sky that you see actually has some definition.
Right after sunset, or was that?
No, this is middle of the night.
Middle of the night?
Yeah, it was pretty much pitch black. All these buildings and everything down there, we don't really have lights on them. It's all what's happening naturally in the city, in combination with car headlights and street lamps. And here I'm really just walking with him, and left and right of Scott Sakamoto, who's on Steadicam. 2 electricians walking with little handheld lights that I control on the dimmer, like just ready, standing by.
You're talking about like the red light?
Yeah, on the left of camera. Then I control them all with my little wireless dimmer. It's called DMXit, and I love it. Even during the shot, like vary the levels and change them all the time. But a lot of what you see on his face is really just what he's getting here ambience-wise. So they're walking with a light that's off.
Uh-huh.
2 of them.
And then you're just on that
and
dimmer.
And then, the gaffer comes, it's like, did you lose connection? Like it wasn't on. Like, no, it's okay. Yeah, I know. I didn't have to. But it's nice to have it because an actor will do something different every time. Like he'll bury his head, and especially when he's with the Ray-Bans, or when I want to create like a moment where he gets a little more keyed. That's me, like on the walk, bringing up a level, and then this camera, of course, shooting at the sensitivity that it can offer, and I really take advantage of that. I just put that little practical on the guy's stand, see all these highlights, all these reflections on the street.
Yeah.
They're not from movie lights, they're really from those street lights and all that. My way into Sony was that I just happened to be in Bulgaria and doing an Apple commercial, and they had an FX3, and I go, wow, this camera looks really good, like at least on the monitor here, and it's commercial, I'm totally fine for that. But that's kind of what sparked my curiosity initially, and I go, this could come in really handy for the way we want to approach it visually and really use all the period practical lighting and just being able to maneuver quickly and not get hung up on huge pre-lights. And we like to have all these connected shots where you're on a 3/4 frontal and it rotates around and you see the audience. And so I really didn't want to clog the setup with a lot of scissor lifts and condors and light stands, and also knew our limitations on schedule. And
You said 100 locations in what, 60 days or so? So
Yeah.
you need to move fairly fast.
And it was similar to Walk the Line. We had 50 days and also like 100. So we knew we have to move to cover these concert sequences. And I ended up using the FX3, put on a Panavision adapter, and I ended up using that for rehearsals with my Panavision lens and basically as a director's finder. But it also gives you this advantage where you can actually shoot the rehearsal, or we can put it up on the monitor at DIT, and then people can work off of that.
It actually makes a lot of sense to just slap a PL adapter on an FX3 and there's your viewfinder right there.
Right.
So you got your light meter out.
I think this particular photo is kind of posed. I go, oh wow, I got my light meter. I'm using my light meter to like take a photo. Because it's such a rarity. But we do check it because when ambience drops in rooms and stuff and I'm using natural light, I want to always kind of like have them track. So when we lose it, we can recreate and keep the same ratio. So I go, read that wall, read that wall, read that closet, like, and write down. And then when we come back from lunch and nighttime out, so then when I'm actually recreating and lighting it, I can still maintain it.
Right.
It's good to have. I feel comfortable.
And it makes a nice photo too.
And it makes a very nice photo, yeah.
You know, fancier than looking at a monitor, I guess.
Yeah.
It almost feels like you can start lighting for your eye rather than.
Well, I always kind of lit by eye. Like with film, I could light to eye. Like I could light through my eyepiece. I mean, I was so familiar with my eyepiece and then the little ND glass or my viewing glass. But then once I started using these digital cameras, it felt like if I light by eye, and then it just looks too bright and too overlit. So I still light by eye, but I have to do it off a monitor. The first movie I ever did digitally was This Is 40, and Judd Apatow likes to do really long takes, and Janusz had shot the one before, and they built 2,000-foot mags. And so I go, okay, well, I'll shoot digital, but I don't care. I'll just work the same way I always did. And I would go to set, light it by eye the way I always did, and then go back to the monitor and look at it, and it looked terrible. And then I would stay on monitor and tell my gaffer, okay, turn that off, like looking, okay, turn this off, okay, that's starting to look better. And I would go back to set and it would look terrible to eye. So I can't really light to eye on set anymore, but I can still paint and light the same way, but I have to be on monitor. That's why, you know, I always have an on-set monitor. I operate off an OLED that's mounted to the dolly, like a 17-inch.
I mean, how cool is it to just hear him talk about the way he works, you know? I mean, it's just such an inspiration for not just like the movies he's shot that are amazing, but just how long he's been doing this, you know? And never stagnated, even after 55 movies, and literally been shooting movies since I was born, basically. So it really is an inspiration on not just cinematography, but just like a creative growth and just constantly pushing the boundaries. A huge thanks to Phedon Papamichael for sharing some of that deep knowledge with us in his time, and thanks to Sony for sending me out there. And go watch the movie, go buy an FX3, link in description, and thank you for watching, and happy holidays, happy new year. Yeah, see you on the next one.